everyone, and today we are going to enable Dhcp on our domain controller. What Dhcp does is basically assign IP addresses to the clients on the domain from a scope of set IP addresses that we are about to set up. So let's get into it. I'm going to go into my server manager. If I click here, let's open up my server manager. I'm going to click on rules. Now I open up my server manager, and I want to add rules. So I'm going to add rules. You can skip this part of the wizard. You really want here so is to add the Dhcp server snapping. So we're going to take that off, Dhcp server, and we're going to click next. This is just a bit of warning here, so that we should have at least one static IP for this computer, and we need to ensure that we create our subnets, our scope and exclusions for our Dhcp server. This here so is the address of the network card attached to this computer. This is the address, the IP address that the Dhcp server is going to be binded to. So let's just click next here. If you had more than one network card, you would have to select which network card you wanted to bind the Dhcp server to from this menu. You'll have another IP address showing up here for us to select from. We're just going to click next, and our parent domain, this is the preferred DNS IPv4 address. We're just going to validate it. See, it's valid, and we're going to hit next. We do not have a Win server connected to this machine, so we're going to leave this radio button checked as is, and we're going to hit next. Now we need to add a scope of possible IP addresses for the Dhcp server to choose from. Without the scope, the Dhcp server can't do. So we're going to name the scope first, so we're going to call it my scope, I guess. We're gonna start it at say 10. So this is our scope we just created. We need to now give it a subnet mask. Okay, now we need to activate this scope in order for it to take effect. So I'll just leave this checked, and I'll click OK. Mine. Now we see it coming up here. So we have my scope, and this is our IP address range. And if you want to, we could edit this scope, maybe change the name or change the range, or we could delete the scope altogether. Okay. Now we're gonna hit next. We do not have IPv4 enabled on this server, so I'm going to choose the option disable Dhcp version 6 because I don't have the IPv6 enabled on this server. I'm going to use my current credentials, which will be username, my domain //administrator. I'm going to hit next, and this here is a summary of what we did basically. So I don't have a default gateway set. My subnet mask 255.0. My scope is from 192.168.0.10 to 192.168.0.30. My scope has been activated. My Dhcp version 6 is disabled. Right, and now we're going to hit install so that the snapping will be installed. Okay, we see here that my Dhcp server installation succeeded, so I'm going to close this work now because my snapping has been installed. So we close up our server manager, and we're going to go into our start menu. We're going to go into administrative tools, and we're going to click on Dhcp. that DHCP has been installed, and it's been installed to end server 08.mydomain.com. We're just gonna maximize this a bit. When we see drop down here, so we have two versions. We have DHCP for IPv version 4 and DHCP for IPv version 6. We're gonna just skip through the IPv version 4 here, and this is my scope, or the name of the scope I created. And you see here, this is the address. They have different options here. We can actually change or. So let's go into the address pool first. So we have here, and this is the address pool we have from. We have from 192.168.0.10 to 192.168.0.13, and this is the address range for distribution. Address leases. Well, we didn't create a lease for any of the addresses as yet, so this should be blank. We have reservations, and again, we didn't create any reservations. But what this does basically is, let's right click on it and create a new reservation. Okay, so we need to create a reservation. So I'm just gonna call this the boss, and 01. I need to get the MAC address for the PC that I'm about to create the reservation for. So what I'm gonna do is, since this is the IP address for my server itself, I'm just gonna go into my command prompt and get the MAC address for this. Let's get the MAC. Okay, so what I just did, I got the MAC address for my server, and I'm gonna paste it in here now. Put this as controller. So what I'm doing here is I'm reserving an address, an IP address, so that my server will always get this address. The thing with it is that this address is not actually in the scope I created, so it's being kind of redundant. But it's just to show how to go about creating a new reservation. Once I hit add, I can close, and you can see here, so that the reservation I just created has shown up in our reservation list, and we can do this for any computer that falls in the domain. Let's see here, we have scope options. So I have a DNS server, DNS domain name. Remember, what DHCP does is give IP addresses from a scope of IP addresses that we choose to all the computers on the domain. But it also works with DNS, because remember, DNS needs to map the server, the computer, sorry, to the IP address. So that's it for version 6. If you go into version 4, so if you go into version 6, we should see some very similar options in version 6. I right click on and hit new scope to create a new scope. You have defined user classes, vendor classes, and so forth. Now display statistics. This little option here so allows us to see all pretty much everything that has happened with our DHCP server. So you can see how many releases there have been, total scopes in the DHCP server, and so forth. Now, if I add a machine to enable the DHCP on one of my client machines, I should see that changing to show the distribution of an IP address to that machine. Another thing with this is I can actually show my lease. If I go back in here, so my this address leases. You can see this in active. Okay. A new exclusion range. What this exclusion is that within the scope that I created, I can actually exclude certain IP addresses from that scope. So I created between 10 and 30. So if I went to the exclude, I could actually exclude 192.168 to 15 to 192.168 to 25. So what I did here is that the addresses that are included in this range here would be excluded from the scope that my DHCP can distribute to clients on the domain. So I can create here now new scope, refresh by the properties. You can see here automatically update statistics. Here allows me to make some other changes and enable DNS dynamic updates according. So you can see I have many things I can do with DHCP server. Now I'm gonna come out of this. I'm gonna enable it on one of my client machines, which would be Windows 7. I simply got Windows 7. And to enable DHCP on a client computer, you simply go and open my network sharing center. I'm going to change my adapter settings. Just checking to see if I was actually connected to the moon. I was. So I'm going to right click here now. I'm going to hit properties. I'm going to select IPv version 4 and hit properties again. And now you see I have a static IP address here already configured on this machine. I'm going to change this to obtain IP address automatically, and I'm going to obtain DNS server address automatically as well. I'm going to hit OK and close. So now this machine can get addresses from my scope that I created on my server because it is part of the domain. That's it pretty much for this video. Thanks everyone.